Imagine you're living what seems like the perfect fairy tale life. You're married to a loving husband, raising 3 beautiful children, and everything appears picture perfect from the outside. But what if, behind the smiles and family photos, there was a darkness no one saw coming? One day that illusion shatters in the most horrific way possible. This is the sad story of Shanara Patterson, a devoted wife and mother whose life ended in a tragedy that no one could have predicted. On the morning of December 11th, 2023, a man visited his brother's apartment complex in Las Vegas to check on him, expecting a routine visit. Instead, he uncovered a horrifying scene no one could have predicted. Inside the apartment, he found the lifeless bodies of his brother, Marvin Patterson, Marvin's wife, Shanara Patterson, and their 3 children, all of whom had been brutally shot. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police were quickly called to the 7500 block of Oso Blanco Road near Durango Drive, where authorities confirmed the devastating discovery. The 5 victims were identified as 34-year-old Shanara Patterson, her husband Marvin, and their 3 children ages 6, 11, and 14. The shockwaves from this tragedy reverberated not only through the family, but throughout the entire community. This case raises deeply unsettling questions about trust and the complexities of human nature. The horrific act of one individual taking 5 lives in a single night forces us to question the people we allow into our lives and how well we truly know them. From the outside, the world may see a picture-perfect family, but behind closed doors, hidden darkness can fester. Before delving into the details of this heart-wrenching story, we must first extend our heartfelt condolences to the loved ones impacted by this devastating event. The loss of Shanara and her children is unimaginable, and this tragedy stands as a sobering reminder to remain vigilant in the relationships we hold close. Shanara Patterson, affectionately called Nara by those close to her, was born on December 10, 1989, in Long Beach, California. She had made a life for herself in Las Vegas, Nevada, as a mother of 3 and a loving wife. At 34 years old, she seemed to be living a fulfilling life. Her children were her world: 14-year-old Keziah Khan, 11-year-old Derek Jr., a DJ, and 6-year-old Zamira Patterson. Keziah was known by family and friends as Zia, while Zamira went by the nickname Duty. These nicknames reflected the close-knit and affectionate bond the family shared. Shanara and Marvin Patterson, her second partner, had been together for several years and married in May 2019 in Las Vegas. It was a union filled with promise and hope, and from the outside, their family seemed like a picture of happiness. Marvin was the father of 2 of Shanara's children, and although they blended 2 different family units, they appeared to make it work. Friends and neighbors described the couple as happy and devoted, often seen together in public, sharing tender moments. From their social media presence, their lives seemed perfect. Family videos, outings, and celebrations gave the impression that they were deeply in love. In the Our Love Story section of their wedding website, Shanara expressed how grateful she was to have found Marvin. She thanked God for sending her a partner who appreciated and respected her. In her words, she vowed never to take Marvin for granted, and the 2 celebrated their love with a grand wedding ceremony. It was a joyful occasion, with Shanara's father proudly walking her down the aisle. Sadly, shortly after the wedding, her father passed away, leaving Shanara in emotional pain, but she found solace in her new husband. Their family of 5 was complete. Life before the tragedy. Life seemed bright for Shanara, who was a talented cosmetologist. She specialized in hair care, particularly braiding and wig installation, and had built a loyal clientele of primarily women of color in Las Vegas. Her work as a stylist gave her a solid reputation in her community. Shanara had a flair for fashion and beauty, often stepping out with stunning outfits, immaculate makeup, and perfectly styled hair. Her children were no different. They were always well-groomed and stylish, reflecting Shanara's love for her family and her attention to detail. Her children inherited not only her sense of style, but also her warm and charismatic personality. Keziah, the eldest, was a bright and creative young girl who loved to draw. Zamira, the youngest, was known for being a sweet and loving child. Derek Jr., or DJ, was just as beloved, with a bright future ahead of him. Friends and family described Shanara as selfless, always thinking of others before herself. It was no wonder that people in her life admired her so much. From all appearances, Marvin seemed to be the ideal husband and father. He took care of Shanara's children from her previous relationship as though they were his own. The family often posted about their happy moments online, further supporting the belief that they were living the dream life. There were no outward signs of trouble, no reports of domestic abuse, financial instability, or any major issues. It seemed that they were just another loving family navigating life together. The dark side of Marvin Patterson? But behind the facade, dark clouds were beginning to gather. The shocking side of Marvin Patterson was revealed in October 2022 when he was first arrested on serious charges. According to Clark County District Court documents, Marvin faced 9 felony charges, including several offenses involving children. The charges were alarming: 5 counts of lewd acts with a child under 14, 2 counts of assault on a minor under 16, 1 count of lewd conduct with a child under 16, and 1 count of first-degree kidnapping of a minor. These crimes allegedly occurred between 2013 and 2022, which was especially disturbing given that Marvin lived in the same house as his 14-year-old stepdaughter Keziah at the time of his arrest. The community was in shock. Marvin, the man who appeared to be a loving husband and father, was accused of heinous crimes. His behavior toward the victims, who were allegedly young girls living in the same apartment he shared with Shanara and the kids, led to his immediate arrest. After his arrest, Marvin's bail was set at $100,000, and strict conditions were placed upon him, including house arrest and the surrender of his passport. The court imposed these conditions to ensure that Marvin would not flee and to protect the community from further harm. Despite these measures, Marvin's attorney argued for a reduction in bail, claiming that the $100,000 figure was too high for Marvin, who could not afford it. In December 2022, Judge Diana Sullivan granted the request, reducing Marvin's bail to just $10,000. He was released under the same strict conditions, including electronic monitoring, but the reduction in bail proved to be a fatal mistake. Marvin's release allowed him to return home, and while he was prohibited from living with his family because of the charges involving minors, it wasn't enough to prevent the impending tragedy. The horrific crime. Almost a year later, on December 11, 2023, Marvin committed the unimaginable. The day before, Shanara had celebrated her 34th birthday. What should have been a time of joy quickly turned into a nightmare. Marvin, overwhelmed by his mounting problems, including financial stress and the impending loss of his home, took out his frustrations on his family. After being released on bail, Marvin had to deal with not only the criminal charges, but also the daily reality of family life. Financially, things were tough. He was unable to keep up with rent, and Shanara had recently been evicted from a temporary home. The weight of these issues crushed Marvin, leading him to take desperate action. On the morning of December 11th, Marvin's brother Jason received a text from Marvin, who sounded overwhelmed and on edge. Jason went to check on his brother, kicking down the door to discover the massacre inside. The lifeless bodies of Shanara, Keziah, Samira, and Marvin himself were found. Only DJ, barely clinging to life, was still breathing. Jason immediately called 911, pleading for medical help, but it was too late for the others. DJ was rushed to University Medical Center, where he fought for his life, but the physical and emotional scars would never heal completely. This heinous act left everyone devastated. What could have driven Marvin to commit such a monstrous crime? He had not only taken the lives of his wife and children, but had also attempted to take the life of his own biological son, DJ. The case quickly became a talking point for the community, legal experts, and activists alike. People questioned why Marvin was granted bail in the first place, given the severity of the charges he faced. Could this tragedy have been prevented if he had remained behind bars? A broken system? In the wake of the killings, public outcry for accountability grew louder, with many questioning the decisions made by the justice system that may have indirectly led to this horrific tragedy. Activists and community leaders pointed fingers at Judge Sullivan, who had reduced Marvin Patterson's bail from $100,000 to a much lower amount. They argued that had the original bail amount been upheld, Marvin would have likely remained behind bars, and this devastating loss of life might have been prevented. The decision to allow a man accused of severe crimes against children to walk free on a lowered bail was seen by many as a grave miscarriage of justice, sparking a debate about the fairness and responsibility of the legal system. Critics, especially advocates for victims of violent crime, called for an investigation into how such a decision was made and pushed for systemic reforms to ensure that similar situations would never occur again. Jasmine Lee, the founder of a support group for families of murdered victims of color, was one of the most vocal voices in this movement. She expressed deep anger and frustration over Marvin's release, labeling it a slap in the face to victims and their families. She, along with others, insisted that had Marvin been kept in custody, Shanara and her 3 children might still be alive today, their futures untainted by such a senseless act of violence. Many echoed Lee's sentiments, particularly those working with organizations that advocate for the protection of children and other vulnerable groups. They pointed out that the justice system had not only failed Shanara and her children, but it had also failed in its duty to protect society's most defenseless members, children. This case became a rallying cry for changes in how bail is set, especially for those accused of violent or serious crimes. It prompted calls for stricter guidelines that would prevent potentially dangerous individuals from being released back into the community, particularly when they face charges that involve harm to minors. The case also reignited discussions about the need for better risk assessments during bail hearings. Critics argued that the court system must consider the safety of potential victims when deciding whether to release individuals with serious allegations hanging over their heads. In Marvin's case, the warning signs were clear. He was facing charges related to child abuse, and yet he was deemed fit to be released on bail, despite the potential threat he posed. This tragic outcome left many wondering how such a decision could have been made, and it ignited a broader conversation about accountability within the judicial system. Some argued that the judge's decision reflected deeper flaws in the legal framework, where too often the rights of the accused are prioritized over the safety and well-being of victims and their families. Others saw this as a clear example of why reforms are urgently needed, including more stringent conditions for bail, especially in cases involving violent offenses. In the months following the murders, public pressure continued to mount, with advocacy groups organizing protests and demanding legislative changes. Families of victims called for judges to be held accountable for their rulings, especially when those rulings result in devastating consequences. They insisted that judges and prosecutors alike should face greater scrutiny and bear responsibility when their decisions fail to safeguard the public. A community in mourning. Shanara Patterson, along with her 2 young daughters, Kazia and Zamira, were laid to rest in what could only be described as one of the most heart-wrenching and emotional funerals Las Vegas had ever seen. The funeral service, held at a packed local chapel, was attended by a large number of family, friends, neighbors, and even strangers who had been touched by the tragedy. People from all walks of life gathered in solidarity, mourning not only for the family that was lost, but for the bright futures that had been cruelly taken away. The chapel was filled with a heavy, palpable grief. The somber atmosphere was punctuated by the sound of muffled sobs and cries as people tried to come to terms with the enormous loss. It was almost impossible to grasp how such a tragedy could have struck a family that had once seemed so full of life, joy, and potential. The emotional eulogies delivered by Shanara's closest friends painted a picture of a woman who was not only a dedicated mother, but also a friend to many in the community. She was described as kind-hearted, selfless, and always willing to lend a helping hand, whether it was organizing school events or supporting her friends through difficult times. Her daughters, Kazia and Zamira, were remembered as vibrant, intelligent young girls who were loved by everyone who knew them. Their teachers, classmates, and family members all spoke of their joy, innocence, and boundless potential. They were 2 little girls who loved life and had their whole futures ahead of them. Their laughter, once a source of light in the Patterson household, had been silenced far too soon. As their tiny caskets were carried out of the chapel, it felt like the entire community's heart broke in unison. Outside, a sea of flowers, candles, and photographs decorated the memorial space, a tribute to the lives lost. People had left handwritten notes expressing their sorrow, offering prayers, and sharing how Shanara and her daughters had touched their lives in ways both big and small. The tragedy had become not just a personal loss for the Patterson family, but a collective wound for the entire community. Strangers, who had never met Shanara or her daughters, were also moved by their story, compelled to show up and honor their memory. Among those attending the funeral were Shanara's childhood friends, co-workers, and even old neighbors from her previous homes. They spoke about her unwavering loyalty, her infectious smile, and her devotion to her children. Everyone who knew Shanara talked about how much she cherished her role as a mother and how her daughters were always her top priority. Her family life, from the outside, had always seemed picture perfect, which made the events leading to her and her daughter's deaths even more heartbreaking and difficult to comprehend. As the service drew to a close, many in attendance could be heard whispering the same question: why? Why did such an unimaginable fate befall this loving family? How did everything go so wrong so quickly? In their eyes, this was a nightmare that should never have happened, especially not to someone like Shanara. No one could have predicted the horrifying events that unfolded. And yet, here they were, standing together in shared grief and disbelief. Some spoke of the hidden struggles Shanara might have faced behind closed doors, struggles that no one fully understood or anticipated. The shocking nature of her death, at the hands of someone she loved and trusted, left an indelible mark on everyone who had ever been a part of her life. It was a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that sometimes the people we trust the most can be the ones hiding the darkest secrets. The tragic story of the Patterson family is one that will haunt their community for years to come. It serves as a chilling cautionary tale about the complexities of human relationships and the danger of placing blind trust in the people closest to us. On the surface, Shanara Patterson and her family seemed to be living a happy, peaceful life, one that many would envy. She had a loving husband, 3 beautiful children, and a strong support network of friends and family. But beneath the facade, there were signs of deep turmoil, signs that went unnoticed or were brushed aside until it was far too late. The loss of Shanara and her daughters is not only a personal tragedy, but a stark reminder of the hidden battles people may face behind closed doors. Relationships that seem perfect from the outside can often hide deep cracks, fissures that may not become visible until it's too late. It also reminds us that we should never take a person's well-being for granted, nor assume that we fully know what someone is going through, even if they seem to have everything together. Desperation, fear, and darkness can reside where we least expect it, and they can drive even the most unlikely of people to commit acts of unspeakable harm. The Patterson family's story will forever be etched in the hearts and minds of those who knew them, and of those who have since heard their tragic tale. It is a heartbreaking lesson in the unpredictable nature of life and the devastating consequences of hidden emotional struggles. Shanara's life was a testament to love, resilience, and motherhood, and her death serves as a somber reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind closed doors. Shanara's legacy should not only be one of loss and sadness, but also of the importance of mental health awareness, the need for open conversations about emotional and domestic struggles, and the power of community support. This story shows us that while we may never be able to predict or fully prevent such tragedies, we can certainly do more to protect those around us by creating a culture of compassion, understanding, and vigilance. The Patterson family's story is a tragic one, but it is also a wake-up call. It serves as a reminder that love, trust, and happiness can be fragile, and that we must always be mindful of the silent battles others may be fighting. Let their story encourage us to be more compassionate, more aware, and more willing to reach out to those in need before it's too late.